and welcome to another episode of the Spiritual, Sexual, Shamanic podcast. I am Simon, and today we have another amazing guest with us from the ISTA field, Deva. Now, Laura's background is in clinical and criminal psychology, traditional tantra, embodiment, and trauma. This unique mixture allows her to see beyond forms with clarity and compassion, enabling breaches for core emergence. She's been leading groups through transformative processes since 2012. She's particularly devoted to collective change and the emergence of a new civilization, one based on freedom from conditioning and the awakening of human hearts. Laura is part of the teaching faculty at the International School of Temple Arts and at Highden Temple. She's based in Geneva, Switzerland, where she's a pillar of the local ISTA community and where she offers in-person workshops in addition to her psychotherapy practice. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Simon. Hi, everyone.
Thanks for coming on board. Yeah, it's great to have you. How is Geneva, Switzerland today?
Well, actually, I'm not in Geneva right now. I'm in Vienna, Austria, but I'm sure Geneva feels great today too.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to have an episode with you because, as maybe some of our listeners know, we have all kinds of teachers in ISTA, people from all different backgrounds, like some from the business world, some from the religious community. Some people have been doing personal development workshops since the 80s, like bringing that old school flavor. And as it says in your bio, you've got this really interesting mix in your background, like a trained psychologist, clinical psychologist, but also super dedicated to these different styles of these different kinds of spaces that ISTA offers. So what we talked about maybe sharing today is about this difference between what we can call like spaces of initiation, initiatory spaces, and maybe what we could think of as more traditional therapeutic spaces. So I wonder if you could maybe just start us off by telling us a little bit maybe about what each of those spaces are, what the difference between them is.
All right, let's just jump into the topic, and I guess like the first thing that I want to differentiate, or not really differentiate, but maybe give a little bit of insight in, is that initiation in itself is unavoidable. It's like we are going through initiation constantly in the courses of our life, because for me, initiation is a transformation into a different state. It's just a state of evolution. So life by itself is a constant initiation, is a constant state of evolution in which we're going to be tested many times with so many episodes of life to grow our capacity to be wider, to be more than just this individual self that is experimenting life from a self-centeredness. So initiation, we all know what it is, and we might be aware or we might not be aware of those stages that we go through life, but we are constantly going through that. So just as an example, it's like someone dies around us, or we lose a job, or we have a breakup, or any challenging times in our life offers us a place of initiatory transformation from one state to another another state that includes our previous state, but that is wider than the state in which we were before. So I just sort of named that because it is important to know that our human condition is bringing us inevitably into an evolution path in which we're going to become more than what we were before. And so we can resist that. And the more we resist, those transformation, and the more maybe we're gonna be lost into those loopholes, and it's like into those places in which we are in a limbo. We feel that we are restricted. There's something that doesn't actually go all the way through. Because an initiation is this. It's almost like a penetration into a bigger sense of the self. And so if you don't penetrate through fully, you just get stuck into, into a cage, into what we call a traumatic state. So that's a nuance to have. Then initiatory spaces, this is what we offer in ISTA and in other transformational spaces, are places where we create setups in a group field in which initiation becomes a rite into this transformation. So it is a conscious way to move from one state to another one with the help of a group. Yeah, so that's what is a transformational space, and it used to be common. I mean, rites of passage used to be common in tribes. It used to be the normality, and this is something that we actually lost over time as we lose our tribes. As we lose also a way to live in tribes and become more individualistic with modern society, this is something that we have lost. And so therefore, it's not that we have lost initiations. We continue being initiated, but there is so much more gap for being traumatized into those initiations because they're not conscious, and they're not held into a group that holds those traditions, that knows how to move through those initiations. Because who speaks about initiation speaks about a risk of death. And it's like not so much of a risk of dying properly, although in some initiations, in some tribes, actually the risk was real. You could go and like swim with crocodiles, so that you become a man, or you jump from edges and make sure that you're alive at the end. So even if we're speaking about eventually a real risk of dying, it is more metaphorically that actually there is something that needs to die, a sense of smallness or individuality, or stretching some edges of the perception of the self needs to die, so that there is a capacity to lend into a bigness, into a sense of belonging to something bigger than just what you believe you were. So an initiation in itself has always an amount of risk that is taken. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really speak about therapy yet, but
wow. No, I mean, let's take a pause. Incredible. One of the questions that comes up to me as we get towards, I suppose we're building towards this comparison between a kind of let's call it self-development. We'll put the term self-development on there. A kind of self-development that is therapeutic, that maybe we've seen more often in films and things in our culture. We're more used to seeing therapy-style personal development scenarios. As we work towards getting a comparison between that and these initiatory experiences and spaces that you're talking about here, we can take a pause. And one of the questions that comes up for me is like, so if in places like ISTA and Highden and other spaces, we're creating these initiatory spaces that you're talking about, but people are in their regular lives are going through these initiations anyway. How does that work? To have like, are you repeating the same kinds of initiation in those conscious spaces that people are already going through in their lives? Well, how does that seems like maybe you're just repeating stuff that people are already going through. or inventing initiations that people need to go through, and saying that they're from the past or something like that. So that's just, I guess, a confusion that I have. Could you clarify that for me?
Sure, it's a good question. It's not so much that you're repeating rites that you're already going through. It's like life is going to throw at you challenges so that you can grow your awareness, your consciousness, so that your consciousness from just I am an individual, Laura, a woman that has her regular life, and I'm going through my life and I'm going to preserve my safety into my life. Life is going to throw me unsafety and instability and challenges that will trouble this, so that I can go over the edge of my safety and feel like that there is something bigger than just me as an individual. So life is going to throw those challenges anyway. So then when you come into spaces like ISTA Highden and probably so many other spaces that I don't even know about, you not only you go through this initiation giving consent, like like there's actually a consent that is given to that, so you can be more prepared, like that you're gonna come out of those spaces not being the same as before. And that's also another quality of initiation. It's like usually when you go through initiation, you're never the same as the one that you used to be. It's like when you go through a grief process of the death of one of your member of your family, like if it was someone close, that you're going to be transformed into something else. When you go through any kind of death processes, the one you become is never the same as the one you were before. When you come out of ISTA, you're not the same as the one you were before. It's like there is a sense of like losing, not so much losing who you were, but integrating who you were into something that is bigger now. And so when you come into those places, you are going consciously, even though you don't know what is going to happen, because that's also a sense of initiation. Is another element is it's totally abrupt, radical, discontinuous. You don't know. It's mysterious. Like you're not. Even though you're prepared for it, you're not really prepared for the details of it. Most of the time you don't really know what is going to happen, because there needs to be a sense of being out of your comfort zone, out of what you can predict, out of your control, so that you can actually go through that transformation. Another important aspect is that in our spaces in ISTA or in Highden, we are using the group as an acceleration of those processes, which means that I can only, as myself, go through life, go through that amount of initiation, because I only have this life. If I'm going with a group into an initiation, it's like we are all offering our initiation for the group, which means that then the group itself is going through an initiation that goes way further than what I could have gone individually. Yeah, because it means that what I'm going to offer to the group will be given to everyone as their own initiation, even if they're not going personally through that one, so you're just accelerating the process of evolution. Yeah. And so, and another thing is like when you go into groups that are already gone through initiatory spaces together, there is a sense of being held into the most terrifying places in which the sense of self will totally dissolve and collapse. So what happens when you go through life and you go through initiations without being held or without being helped is that actually you can create fractures. You can create fracture in your psyche, and then this is what I call the loophole, like in which you can actually fall into traumatic experiences and just stay stuck in it. So you just stay stuck into the self instead of letting the self go into a wider sense of the self. You also speak about, there's another thing that you spoke about that I want to jump into, is you spoke about self-development. This is what we call, like the self-development work, which was which came out of psychology. We're trying to develop the self. I feel like initiatory spaces and transformational spaces are the opposite of this. It's like we're actually self-dissolving, so it's like on one hand, and we can start having a little bit of discussion around those two topics. Like on one hand, therapy is developing the self. So, and especially if there are fractures of the self, which, we all have our wound, we all build up, different individual paths and individual stories that created wound, that opened some traumatic repetition in our lives. And so therapy will help to look at those wounds, to look at those trauma places in us, and trying to build enough safety in a therapeutic in a therapeutic space, so that those wounds can be freed, so that actually the self can be reconstructed, and it's not just lost into this limbo. On the other hand, transformational spaces are spaces in which, once this self is built enough, we can offer it and dissolve it, and letting go of that sense of individuation to offer that individuality into a group, into a soul emergence, into something that is bigger than just the perspective of the self as an individual. Yes, so somehow they are complementary, and that's why the war that is actually going on at the moment between those two spaces has kind of no sense. It's like there is a need of integration between the needs of a body mind, so the needs of the individual psychological development, and especially if it has been overwounded. And in the same time, there is a need to not indulge, into a traumatic history of the self, and to offer that self eventually to a bigger setup that we are made for. It's like the humanity is seeking for initiation. And so even you can seek for it individually, or you can seek for it in a group. And no matter how aware you are, it's like the whole civilization is going into initiation at the moment, if we haven't yet realized, So, so yeah.
I mean, you reference this conversation that's pretty hot right now around this difference between therapeutic spaces and initiatory spaces. And there are going to be a few people who say that these initiatory spaces, there's this sense of unsafety about them. Like there's the potential that they're going to create trauma. So what do you think about that? When people say that, what's your feeling in response to that? Maybe linked with what you've been saying already. What if someone hasn't gone through the self-development process and built up their ego or built up their self into a strong enough form that can be healthily dissolved? Like, is that an issue?
I mean, like one of the things that I wanna go back to is, like, in time of tribes, when individuals were taken into rites and held by a group after that peak, because like those initiation are a peak state, in which you're taken off guard, in which you're just like going to die, like held by a group, you're going to die to yourself, basically. But when they were coming back from initiation, they were still held into those group, and there was a sense of still being able to rest into this group. What happened in ISTA or in Highden or in any other places where we just have a week or a certain amount of time in which we're in those groups, it's like I feel like the new civilization has not yet came, has not yet landed. So somehow like people come into the space and then they go back into their life where they treat it completely individually, and they go back and like, what the fuck just happened? It's like, and sometimes you can reflect upon what you just went through, and depending of your environment, you then coming back into a narrative that has no awareness of the space in which you were, and then it can create a bit of a confusion. So I believe like the fact that we're going into this integration at the moment of those two spaces is deeply important. I feel like there like there are people like me and maybe you and maybe other people that have given their life to it. So somehow initiations spaces feel like home. Like it's like, yeah, well, we're always into those spaces. So there's still a sense of being held in anything that comes up. But many people, and especially now, more and more people are coming into those spaces that still like have they have a total normal life. That might be their first ever experience in such a space, and then they go back to their life. They don't even know who to speak about that with, and so I think that there is a real need to start bridging and linking those spaces so that there is more integration, that can flow both ways. I think I went a little bit out of your question, but can you repeat your question a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in like, what if, so there's this hot conversation going on at the moment where some people point out the potential, what they would say there is the potential for trauma in this, like that would reactivate past trauma, for example, in these spaces.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to take a deep breath, because of course I know that it's like, it is a conversation that creates uncomfortability and polarization. And I'm certainly not here to polarize. Like I said, I'm coming from both directions, like I see the value of actually being in therapeutic spaces. Although I have personally quit psychology 12 years ago because there was a place in my soul that felt like restricted, like I feel like I knew I was more than this, it's like I was more than this story about myself that I could not give enough to my patients, that there was something more. So I kind of like went into more transformational spaces because a part of my soul was ready to take more step ahead, to go faster. And so that's what I believe went on for me. But now I'm coming back to therapy, and I feel like because of this integration that it's needed there. So if I go back to what I was saying at the start, that life is going to throw at you anyway initiations, it means that just being a human and just being alive will definitely create trauma. It's like will put you in situation in which you will be traumatized. And it's not, and the same situation for one person, it's going to create something very different from another person. So your capacity of resilience to trauma will differ from one person to another one. And this cannot, it's like we don't know why, some people have actually more capacity, more capacity to go through experiences than others. And this is regardless of the intensity of the traumatic experience that comes at you. So I wouldn't say that those spaces the transformational spaces will necessarily create trauma, but they might, first of all, call people that are traumatized, for sure. Like, first of all, we're all traumatized, but like, we are going to call people that have a particular trauma around those initiation, because there is a part of the soul that wants to emerge from it, that is calling for that initiation, so that it can come out of that loop. Yeah, so for sure, this is sure. One, people are going to be called because of their trauma somehow. And two, the trauma will be like called forth because the same activation, the intensity of this activation will eventually allow the trauma to dissolve, like to actually go beyond your traumatic identity, so it is needed, there's a need somehow for totally going through your initiation, that your trauma is felt again at the same level of intensity, and so that therefore you can pierce through and move through it. Then what I believe that we did maybe not have enough in our spaces was an integration process after that, because you might go through a high state, you might feel something that opens, and maybe something will just shut down or close off right after this week. And who's there to check, like what's going on? And like, we had sometimes calls or stuff like this, but it's like, yeah, maybe there is a need of having more integration time, integration therapies, maybe like more capacity to have list of different therapists that can bridge those spaces, that can know exactly what is going on. Because if you, and that's also like the problem is like, if you go to I want to say normal therapist, but it's not a normal therapist, but a therapist that has no awareness of what those initiatory spaces are, those transformational spaces are, then how can the narrative help you to move through your experience? It needs to be a therapist that understands those spaces so that it can help you move through that. Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. You said something, this feels like it's connected. You said something earlier about trauma being something to do with being stuck in these states of limbo. Like you got into an initiation, but you didn't get all the way through the initiation. And there's something in what you're saying there about like, if you go to like talk therapy or something like that, and normal therapy in inverted commas, then is there actually anything in that therapeutic space that can help you really burst through the other side of that initiation? And maybe there's not. Yeah. So is there something more you can say about trauma being in this space of like this state of limbo? And
I just want to react to what you were saying in the verbal therapy, and I was reading an article not long ago that, like I just grasped that information because for me it feels really real. It's like most of the time, this article was specific for incest, and it was specific to the loss of memory of ancestral traumas. And most of the time people don't recover so the memory of that trauma in the therapy itself. The memory will be recovered in a situation that is similar, in reading a situation of someone else, or your senses are taken into the similarity of the situation that you went through. So basically, when your body memory is reactivated to the same level of your traumatic experience, eventually the memory of the incest was coming back. So I want to transpose that theory upon a bigger sense of trauma. I don't think that you can resolve a trauma just by speaking about it, so just by being into a setup of therapy. But there is a need of exposing, of bringing the intensity in the body, because the body remembers that, and you need to elevate almost like the intensity in the body to that level of frequency, so that actually it's almost like it opens the gate of eventually the exit door, it's like you just lock into that box in ages, and you just repeat in a loop, like endlessly, this story. If it's conscious, and if it's unconscious, it's not even, you don't even remember it. Like I said, with a lot of incest trauma, they lock into your unconscious. You don't even know, but you repeat constantly, and you bring yourself into the same situation so that actually that trauma can come out. So, and that's another interesting topic. It's like, I've worked a lot with sexual offenders, and I was very interested in sexual traumas, and how a lot of people who have gone through sexual abuse will actually repeat constantly. So it's not rare that a woman that has been raped once will be raped at least 2, 3, or 4 times in her life. So it's like, it's interesting. Like there's a question mark. It's like, why this is happening? And somehow it's like, it feels like that one thing that wants to be worked through, if it's not, and then it's stuck into a traumatic imprint, then it's just going to repeat itself until eventually that lock opens, and that energy can be freed. But if you don't free it, then it just can be locked again, and it will repeat endlessly until the end of your life, or until the end of that crystallized and densified identity that is almost there to protect the terror that is felt, which is a terror of dying in those situations. And in order to not feel and offer yourself totally to that feeling, there is a lock, there is a crystallization, there's a density that happens into this, and then you can't move on. Yeah.
And yeah, I really feel that. So the sense of, you say, go through an experience that has the same intensity or the same frequency as the traumatic experience that your body remembers. What can that experience look like? That one where you raise the intensity, or you raise the frequency to almost to bring that up and open the doorway for it to be released. And maybe people might hear that and wonder, what could that possibly? I don't want to do that. Yeah.
And again, sometimes it's like you can do that in a setup in which it is conscious and you're trying to reach this, and it can also happen unexpectedly. So I want to still take an example of someone who has been sexually abused in his childhood, that doesn't remember it, and it's there, it's locked in the body, but you don't know about it. You don't remember consciously about it. And maybe you watch a movie in which this is happening to someone else, and your body starts to react. You start having a panic attack or something. It's like you can't breathe anymore. Like something is touched. There is almost like mirror neurons. That start like feeling something, but not from a place that you haven't lived it. Actually, your flesh has lived it, but you don't remember. And so it's starting to open, you coming closer to that bridge, of awareness, of consciousness. And so something's happening and you don't know what it is. So like that's how the body reacts. So, in certain therapy, we also call that exposure therapy. In cognitive behaviorist therapy, it's like if you're scared of spiders, we're going to bring a little spider at the beginning, and then a bigger one, and then until something starts to be more at ease. Because basically, this terror that I was speaking about now, I'm speaking a bit more in therapeutic terms, but if we speak about in more esoteric terms, it's like that terror that lies constantly at the core of oneself. It just wants to be revealed. and we are just lying layers on top of it constantly to avoid feeling that terror of death, that terror of dissolution, that terror of offering to that nothingness. It's always there. So when a trauma is here, it's even worse. It's like when you have gone through something that has been traumatic, and once again, it doesn't have to be horrible, like a trauma can be just the simple thing, like your psyche will react very differently than my psyche. And so it doesn't have to be the most violent experience that creates trauma. It could be the simplest one, so the trauma intelligence as a very peculiar intelligence that is regardless of the action. It's more the way that you integrate that trauma that is important. So I've lost my train of thoughts. What I was saying about I don't know. Just kind of embracing to this.
We got somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, so rich. Yeah. So I mean, there's so many directions to go. Yeah. Maybe would you be open, willing to share something about your own journey on these? You've spoken a little bit about how you left therapy, your therapeutic practice 12 years ago, and you've been exploring the let's call it the initiatory path, and now you're coming back to use some of the tools that you have from therapy to blend them together a little bit more these days. But what about your own, let's say, personal journey initially? And maybe you want to speak to your journey as part of groups. Can you remember was there a first conscious initiation that you had that really opened your eyes to what was possible?
Yeah, I guess it was not, I feel like like I said, we have so many initiation. The first is probably being birth, but not many of us remember that moment. But then you got many others along the line. But I would say that the one that was the initiation that life threw at me that I remember the most as being like the bigger crossroad, like where something would have been differently. It would have been radically different if that would have not happened in my life was at 18 years old when I was diagnosed with cancer. And so that like being confronted to death in the most unexpected moment. I mean, we're never really ready for this, but at 18, I was really far from even, I don't know, having an awareness that I would eventually die. I mean, I knew I would die, but it was not really clear that it would come so quickly. So, yeah, being diagnosed with cancer and not knowing how long I would eventually live for was radical. It was just like an awakening to, okay, why am I dying now? What did I do? Like, why me? What does it mean? How did I get there? What is life? What is afterlife if I'm going to die? Like, it's like, and of course I was not as aware of that, but like those 2 years of being, transformed by cancer. I wanted to say fighting cancer, but I didn't think it was a fight. It was like being reshaped and polished by cancer. Was really one of the biggest initiation of my life. It's like brought me into a lot of consciousness. Like it brought me a sense of life. It also connected me with my longing for dying. Like there was actually an equal longing for dying that a desire to leave. And so like when you are in those crossroads of life and death, it's like I feel like it's where it's the most narrow, it's like where there is no more sense of separation. And so in those narrow gateways, you are in those huge potent places of deep transformation. And so that was a place for me where I was like, my life took a huge U-turn, like a huge change, and nothing was ever the same since then. Yeah,
amazing. I wonder if you could talk a little bit. This has come up a couple of times. This longing for this longing for death. It's kind of latent in the way you talk, like the dissolving the self. This idea of like letting the self die to something bigger, to something greater. Maybe it's a group of people. Maybe it's like the new age of like what civilization can be. Or then in the very real sense, like you're talking about, like I've got this disease and I don't know which way it's going to go. And feeling like there are these very like by now famous terms in psychoanalysis, like the death drive. I also think of this idea of the oceanic feeling of just being like completely immersed in my being and just like letting go. Why does this come up in this conversation for you? Like, how can this be of benefit to us, or like what is going on with this feeling, this call?
Why this is coming up? I think because it's unavoidable. It's just unavoidable. And I feel like we as humans fight all our life this longing to die, somehow, and then it crystallizes into a fear that we're fighting, and so we're trying to live longer. We're trying to, there's always like a desire to fight that reality. But it's not only a reality that everything is going to eventually die. Everything that has a form will die into another form to eventually die into a formlessness. But it's not only a reality, it's also a deeper longing. Like there is a longing to offer that form to something that is more true, which is formless. And so it's a little bit difficult to understand from a mental standpoint, because then the mind or the I that is identified to that flesh, it's like, of course we don't want to die. Like, it's like, what do you mean? Like, but if the I that actually lies in your soul goes way beyond that flesh, then it just wants to go back to the ocean. It wants to go back to the source where it comes from. So I feel like life is that mixture of dichotomies between everything and is a total opposite, So it's like the desire to live can only exist with the equal desire to die. And again, like this desire to die is not to be taken literally, although sometimes if we don't allow that longing to be felt, then it can take actions into raptures like this way. There is actually a real desire to have that flesh die now, and it goes into suicides, but it's like that longing to go back into this nothingness. It's actually a mystical longing of the seeker. The mystical seeker is constantly wanting to be reunited with that oneness. And in order to be reunited with that oneness, it just died to itself constantly. So it is that longing of death, of dissolution, that allow the seeker to be reunited with its oneness. So it is unavoidable. It is there. It's latent. It just lies just underneath the crust of every of your desires. It's like it goes with it. And so denying that part of reality is actually enabling you to be totally alive, or to actually really embrace your capacity to be in life. Yeah. And it is
amazing.
challenging, because it's like it's challenging because that longing will just constantly come and dissolve every of your creations, because your creation are not yours. Like anything that you're going to create, everything you're going to become in life is to be given away constantly. So every time that you crystallize around an identity, around a belonging, around anything, it's like, then this is taken away from you. And if it's not taken away by you or by your capacity to dissolve, it's going to be taken away by life, at any point. So it is confusing. It's like, how do we are humans that are not just humans? It's like we also are inhabited by that darkness that is just like devouring and absorbing any kind of form that you're trying to manifest in this life. So yeah.
I mean, you could just keep going. You're speaking to me for sure. I mean, so if I'm a person who's hanging on, who has that fear of death that maybe manifests in different ways. Yes, I don't want my body to die. I don't want my partner to leave me. I don't want my parents to die. I don't want my car to get stolen. And I feel that. I feel the intensity of that. What do I do? It's kind of, what if I'm a person that's just like all I think about? It completely consumes me. What do I do?
I just want to give you the example. When I was a child, I remember I was going to bed and I was taken by that terror that my parent would die. It's like I would go to sleep, and it was like, what if and of course your parents are your only resource, when you're a child. So it's like, if my parent were to die, I don't know what I would become. So yeah, when I was a child, and that terror would come, it would come always at night when I was going to sleep. And what I would do at that moment was to pray. And I was not praying for my parents not to die, but I was praying for God to hold me. Like at that time, it was just like, okay, because there's no way that terror is not there. It's like, of course, that terror lies in the in-between of life and death, so it's like in between forms and formlessness. There's this threshold of terror that is there, and that's what create that sense of separation constantly. It's like almost like to have that feeling of oneness, you need to go through that threshold and realize that they can only coexist. Like that any polarity can only exist because it coexists with its opposite. So it's, to me, the answer to what you're saying, it's like when that happens, it's like we're trying to avoid to feel it. It's like, we're trying to go into a relationship and being detached, and being in love and be like, yeah, there's no attachment here. And like trying to do all these polyamory things so that we're not attached, it's like actually that's all bullshit, because there is a terror that lies into the, like as a human being, if I am attached to another form, there's definitely a terror that lies here into losing that other form, so it's like it is inherent. It is here. So we can either deny it and pretend that we're over it, like it's all good, like we're totally detached, or you can actually let yourself feel the helplessness of actually being terrified to lose another one, to lose something, to lose this life, or to lose a parent, or to lose a beloved, or to lose your cat, like this is a human condition. And when you're helpless to that terror, only there you can call for the greatness, you can call to be held. So that little story that I told you when I was a child, somehow it was the answer. It's like, well, you're feeling afraid because you might, you're afraid your parents will die. So go back to God. Like I was going to God, I was like, okay, God, can you help me into that helplessness? Because there's nothing I can do but being terrified, so that as a person, as an individual being, there's nothing that can do but being terrified. So I'm on my knees and I'm asking to be helped and to be held in this. And so only this is a place in which you can let the self be died at the feet of God. It's like you offer yourself to this greatness, that can hold you into this. But what happened is that we are so afraid of feeling the terror that we build up even more layers and identity in order not to feel that core aloneness. This is exactly what it is. Because when I'm here in the bed thinking that my parents might die, it's like, and then I'm going to be all alone. It's like I'm alone in this, It's like, so it's like, in order to not feel that core aloneness, we build up so many things that allow us to feel that we allow us not to feel that terror, basically. The first step to answer your question is that let yourself feel it. Let yourself feel it. Let yourself be, whipped away with the terror of losing forms.
Yeah. I mean, I've got such similar experiences from when I was a child as well. I used to be terrified that I didn't understand tsunamis, like these big waves. I thought they were global phenomena. I thought I was just waiting for the day that one wave was going to wipe out the entire world. I didn't know that they were just localized to specific places. And so I used to go to sleep being terrified of, everyone dying. I thought that it was going to be any day now. And I also have experiences of speaking to God, like with just intuitively. I wasn't raised, all our listeners are coming from different backgrounds. I was raised with some awareness of like Christianity growing up in Australia, but I wasn't raised religious or anything like that. So I had no like specific modeling of talking to a greater power or something like that. But it was interesting just when you were telling that story that you put it in those terms, like you effectively said, ask God's help or something. And I have that feeling in myself, that memory in myself from a child being just wanting to have a conversation. Hey, I feel like I can say that. I feel like I can say, hey, help me here. I can't do it myself. Yeah. So it's interesting that we can start having relationships like that. Intuitively.
But actually, I feel like, sometimes like when we're a child, we have we have much more resources, somehow to certain levels, we have much more resources than later on, like,
Yeah. So is there anything, we have such a short time together. Is there anything as you were thinking about coming on to the podcast and speaking about this topic of initiatory spaces versus therapeutic spaces? Is there anything what more would you want to say in this context to maybe listeners of the podcast who are coming from all different places, maybe haven't heard of these ideas before? Like what trace is there for you that maybe wants to be shared more?
I guess something that I feel like it's really important, and I think I shared that I left psychology 12 years ago because something was called, like I felt, and it started with the cancer. It started with the cancer, it stayed with me, matured for a few years while I was studying, then I started working, and then this calling for more was still there. So I went to a search, I went to search something bigger. I want to speak a little bit about that calling, because that calling is so important to go through an initiation. When I speak about being ready and being prepared, you cannot be prepared mentally to an initiation, because the initiation needs to surprise you. It's to take you away from your control and from your safety zone, so that actually you are out of your of your comfort, of your safety, of anything that you know, so that you can move on. But the only way to be prepared to an initiation is that you are responding to a calling. Like, you actually moving from your soul, basically. That is your soul calling you to something that your soul is ready for. Your mind might not be ready for, you might not know that you can do this, but your soul knows that you're ready for. And so therefore it's orchestrating things in a way that it's calling you into situations, going to make you meet that person that's going to tell you about this and that, and like everything's going to be orchestrated for you to go in that direction that you wouldn't go if you were mentally aware of it, because who wants to go and die? No one wants to. I want to speak about that because it's very important. It's like, and I feel like one of the things that we're going through is ISTA and Highden, but it's like, because it became so popular, it became like this kind of trend, like everyone now wants to do ISTA, or like, and yeah, my friend did it, and so that's cool, and let's do it. So this is where I want to call a little bit of discernment, because if you go into those spaces without having had a real call, there's way more chances that you're going to be burned in a way that it's not necessarily beneficial for you as a body, mind, as a personality, as an individual, but nor for your soul. And so, in Highden, we do interviews before people come, and like I feel like the core of those interviews is actually to listen together and to have a sense of discernment of the readiness of that soul to go through those initiations. So, of course, it cannot be defined by the exterior so much. It's like, there's free will for everyone, but I want to speak to the soul of everyone there. It's like to start having more discernment between what I want because my friend are doing it, or because, it's good in my calendar, or it's good for my curriculum, or like for whatever fucking reason the mind could have to do things, and have a discernment with something that is calling that you don't understand. A soul call doesn't have reason. Like it's not something that you can grasp with your mind. It's something that is calling you beyond your capacity to comprehend it. And so it is and that's why I call it a mystical call, it's like it's something that is calling you somewhere you have no idea why. And it feels a little bit that it doesn't have any sense somehow. So what tune with that calling will help you to go into exactly the places you need to go, and to be able to be prepared for that space, for that rite, for that initiation, because you have been not called by an advertisement, but you actually have been called by the parts in you that are already initiated and that are pushing, it's like there's parts in your soul that already know initiations, that already died, that already went through the many different evolution forms, that already are formless. And so this is the part of you that is directing you and bringing you towards the places, the directions, the people, the spaces that you need to go through. So,
Wow, yeah. That just made something really drop in for me about the soul. Like, I guess my question was, how do I feel my soul call? But I love this description. There's parts of you that have already been initiated. We all have those. That are what are they doing? They're being called towards merging with other integrated parts of ourselves that it can kind of feel in our future or something like this. That's like this internal compass. those already initiated parts of ourselves that are calling us. And how would you describe that? Like, how can I feel my soul call? You know, like if I really want to try and drop into that space. And I got a sense that my mind doesn't have all the answers, and it's maybe not the best decision maker in every circumstance for me. And so I got this feeling of, yeah, it's my soul call. How can I access that?
Of course, every of those things can be bypassed and used, you know, as just a way to go through what the mind wants. You know, the mind can just morph, you know, and morphs into all this little creature to make you believe that this is where we want to go and this is good for us, you know, or we can call it the devil, you know, and us that's like bringing us wherever we want. But yeah, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, I feel like a soul call will always be a little bit uncomfortable. Like there's always like, it's never like, oh yeah, cool. You know, like there's not so much arrogance in there. So it's like a soul call has always a flavor of pushing you really on the edge of something. So it doesn't feel comfortable. It's yeah, there's a sense of really not knowing that, like, and it's a dichotomy because there's always a sense of knowing but not knowing. So it's like it is completely contrasted, you know. It's like somehow you know that you need to go there but you don't know why, and so it creates confusion. But yeah, and more than anything else, the advice I can give, it's like, and we come back to this calling for help. You can call for your soul, you know, you can call for your soul to show you, to guide you. And especially when you're doubtful, you know, like if you don't know, like you're not sure, it's like, well, don't take any actions, don't act on anything, and just call for this to be revealed. You know, ask for your soul to reveal itself. So to become more burning and burning so that it's unavoidable, so that you can only feel it. Yeah.
That makes so much
There's another,
sense.
yeah, sometimes I was also, when I was younger also, so that's another advice from the little child that I was at the time. I didn't know soul yet, you know, it's like I didn't really know what was it about, but sometimes I was calling for my future self. So I was calling for Laura when she's 80, you know, it's like the Laura of the future to, you know, come and help me with taking those decisions or knowing where to go, because she was wiser, because she already knew life, you know. So it's like the whole self, it could be this, but it's also the self that has integrating every aspect of life, you know, that lives at the core of yourself, but that formlessness that is there, that already know everything, that already has been everything and nothing at once, and that is there at the core of every part of yourself that knows, you know. It's like, so you can also call to this. I feel like you can call to many things, but most of the time when you don't know, it's like this humility to be on your knees and to actually confess that you don't know, and then just offer that not knowing to a greater thing, you know. So it could be your older self, it could be the soul, it could be the void, it could be the dark, it could be God, it could be Jesus, it could be whoever that is, that feels like it knows better, that this individuality that right now is fighting to arrogantly to know something, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Wow, such a rich conversation. Yeah. I feel like that's a really sweet place for us to leave it for now. How would that feel for you? For us to, there's a couple of things we need to do to wrap up, but
okay.
Does that feel kind of like it's got a temporary bow on it for the moment?
Yeah.
You can always, amazing.
Yeah.
Would you be up for some quick fire question?
Quick fire question. Let's go for it.
So I've probably got 6 or 7 questions for you, and you can just answer them in 5 words or less, 2 or 3 words if it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah. We do this at the end of every episode.
Okay.
What have you done for the first time recently? What's something you've done for the first time recently?
Oh my God. What? I don't know. What you say? Well, I came to Austria for the first time recently. That was a new country. Yeah, it's like I've never been here before. Yeah.
That's
Austria.
perfect.
Yeah.
What is something you always take on retreat with you?
That I always what? Sorry?
Take on, like, to retreats or trainings with you? Is there something that always goes in your bag?
Oh my God, I'm so bad to this type of question. No, actually, there's not something particular that I take with me. I mean, no. Sorry. My phone.
Yeah.
My phone. Yeah.
I love
phone.
that. Minimal.
Yeah.
Minimal.
Yeah.
What's the best thing about living in Switzerland?
Chocolate.
Well, next question is, what's your favorite dessert?
Tiramisu.
Same.
Yeah.
You're from Italy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you didn't know about the temple art, what would you be doing for a living?
I'd be a psychologist. Yeah.
What's one thing you wish you knew as a teenager?
One thing that I wish I knew. Slowness.
If you're a piece of furniture, what would you be?
I would be a velvet. I'd be a velvet, not couch. How do you say it? Like a one cat, like chair,
Armchair.
a velvet. Yeah, a velvet armchair. Exactly.
Love
It'd be
it.
really comfortable.
And last one, what happens after we die?
Oh, we rest.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. How can people get in touch with you? What are you doing? Like, if people are lit up by what you're speaking about today, how can they follow up?
Well, so of course I've got a few ISTA coming up. That's a place where you can find me. Then on my website, probably you can link the website, lauradeva.com. What I mainly love to do is the 3 months mentorship, which is totally this. It's like, how do we live with the mystery? How can you live into a constant state of dying to yourself? How can you find more inner spaciousness so that you can be moved through life and not resist to everything that comes? So that's a one-on-one that goes for 3 months. I take 6 people at the time. And now I'm investing way more time also in my local community as I'm starting to really be based again in Geneva, which wasn't the case for many, many years. So if you're around Geneva, there's going to be also a few workshops coming out soon. And of course, I'm taking a psychology practice back in Geneva, but also online. So if you feel like that you need more therapy and more support on a weekly basis, also that's another thing that I can do online. So you can just share my website, I guess.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for speaking with us today, Lara. I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thank you for inviting me. That was a challenging topic, a bit edgy, and in the same time, it's like what really lights me up. So I'm glad we had this conversation.
Me too. Okay. Ciao.
Yeah.